Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Rina and I'm the instructor for today's free prep hour for GRE. I'm gonna wait one more minute. Hello all. I'm gonna wait one more minute and then we'll begin just in case some other folks are trickling in here at the top of the hour. And I'm seeing some people saying hello in the chat. So I do like to use the chat in these sessions. And I'll invite you to add comments or give your responses in the chat sometimes. So if you look at the bottom bar of your Zoom, you should see something that says chat. So if you don't have that clicked on and pulled up, I'll invite you to pull that up and type hello into the chat and maybe where you are. So hello and where you are joining from, and that way I can see that folks are seeing the chat and we can greet each other and see where everybody is joining today's session from. Hi, Daniela. Hello. Hi, Michaela. Hi, Allie. Hi, Megan. Hi, Allison. Hi, Janine. Elise. Welcome, Christopher. And if I'm mispronouncing anybody's names, my apologies. Nyla. Hello. Sophia. Hello. Abina. Nikita. Welcome to everybody. Naomi. Andrew. Megana. Anika. And again, I'm sorry if I mispronounced anybody's name. Okay, welcome to everybody. I think a couple other people will join us as we keep going, but I'm going to dive in. So I will screen share my slides. Here we are. So tonight, GRE free prep hour. And for these, I usually run for about 45 to 50 minutes. And then I'll leave 10 minutes at the end for anyone who wants to stick around and more individual question as we're going. So through the session today, if you have specific questions about your studies or things like that, hold on to that till the end when I'll, hang on for a little bit just to talk to folks and talk about your specific questions. But for tonight, we have a specific topic, and tonight's topic is reading comprehension and especially looking at answer choices. So what we're covering for today is thinking about how do we hunt for right answers within the reading comprehension section, and specifically around main point questions and two kinds of inference questions. Inference questions that relate to content passages, the more academic-y passages that make up the bulk of the verbal section, and the logic passages, which are more real-world scenarios, and you'll have one or two of per section. All of the questions that we're going to see today are from the 5-pound book of practice problems, which is a Manhattan Prep book that you can also order online, which is actually 6 pounds. It's a really large book. That's where all these questions are coming from today, and it has tons of great practice questions for you if you want additional practice questions in your studies. So as I said, we're covering hunting for answers on reading comprehension. And this is valuable because GRE reading comprehension, I hope it's valuable. It's about reading, but it's also about answering the questions correctly. And ultimately, your verbal score is reflecting how many questions you answered correctly. It is not actually how well did you understand the passage, though of course that helps you answer the questions correctly. It's just how many questions did you get right. So what that means is when passages feel tough, and even when they don't feel tough, consider analyzing answer choices according to what's in the passage, right? It is how well do you understand the passage, and according to your knowledge of patterns of right and wrong answers. So as you do more and more of these passages, you'll start to get a sense of, and especially on particular question types, what is a GRE-like right answer, and what are some common traps for this kind of question that you want to avoid? So recognizing these patterns of right and wrong answers can help you separate out some tempting wrong answers as you start to see these patterns, and it can help you make really strategic guesses in those moments when you're like, I'm really stumped by this passage. Well, let me draw on what I know about the kinds of questions that GRE likes to ask. So we're going to begin with main point questions. And to begin, I'm going to show you a short passage and I'm going to have you read it. And then we're going to do the main point question for that passage. So I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to read the passage. And I flash showed it to you for a moment because I advanced a little bit too much, but I'll bring it back in a second. So I'll give you 2 minutes to read the passage, and your task, and I'll write this on the slide, but I'll also put this in the chat right now. Your task is to try to summarize the passage in 6 or fewer words. And I want you to do this like, not words. I want you to do this like on your own on the side, thinking, how would I summarize this? And essentially this is going to be your own answer to the main point question. Like, what would right look like to you? Here's what I think the main point is. So here is the passage, 2 minutes to read. I've covered up the question at the bottom, 2 minutes to read and come up with your own 6 or fewer word summary of this passage. Go for it. Okay, that was 2 minutes. I'm going to give you guys 30 more seconds of what I want you to do. Great. Thanks, Garrett. But don't hit enter yet to everybody else. Open up the chat. I want you to put your 6-word summary in there, and I'm going to tell you to hit enter in 30 seconds. So I'll tell you when to hit enter so that we're all hitting enter at the same time and not distracted by each other. So 30 seconds, type up your summary, and I'll tell you when to hit enter. Great, Megan, you're ahead of the game. We'll hit enter in 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, enter in your 6-word summaries. Okay, and scroll up and read each other's. I feel like there's a lot of great and like subtle variations on these summaries here. Anika, I love this. Startup investment, risks, rewards, and uncertainty, right? Like capturing, there's like many facets. There's these rewards, there's also uncertainty. There's risky. Great, right? And like Janine and Ali noting this sort of balance of like, hey, there's more startups, less value, lots of more number of them, less profit, right? Okay, these are great, right? And again, capturing this sort of like, hey, there's this sort of seesaw, like on the one hand, this, on the other hand, that, these different aspects. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to show you the question now. It's a main point question. You've already done your predicting of what your feeling good is looking like. And what I want you to think with this question is, what's your answer? And also, why are the wrong answers wrong? So why is the right answer right? And why are the wrong answers wrong? And what I want you to do, I know I haven't showed you the question yet, but I'm just giving you your full instructions. I want you to send your answer just to me, like send in the chat to panelists. or might say Rina Goldfield, but I think it just says panelists. So send it to private chat basically instead of to everybody, just that I know where people are and you're not being like, oh my God, but everybody else chose Q, you know, why didn't I, right? So send your answer just to me, but you're thinking, why are the wrong answers wrong as well? Okay, here it is. Go for it. 1 minute for the question. Okay, awesome. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you guys what the right answer is. The right answer here is C. And some of you guys got this, great work, but great work to everybody. And if you didn't get this, you're in great company. Lots of people struggled on this one. So our right answer is C. And I'm going to read to you what, I think it was what Megan wrote to me about this, which was right on. I love Megan, your summary here. Megan wrote, C is correct because it summarizes the passage. So we're looking for a summary. It summarizes the passage without passing strong value judgment. It's not saying something is good or something is bad. So no strong value judgment. It's not getting very extreme here. And there aren't extra inferences. So C gives us a summary. It's nice and open and summary. It doesn't give us like extra like, and this is good and this is bad, and it doesn't make extra inferences on top of that. So that is something that's good about C. Now let's think about why the other answers are wrong, right? Okay, Anika is saying the same thing, right? The passage doesn't really make an argument for or against either side. It just states everything, right? So there's no like, the author's like, and that's why this is terrible, right? The author is simply describing a nuanced view. So I want everyone now to pick a wrong answer. So pick a wrong answer and chat to everyone why it is wrong. And bonus, if you got this wrong, try to figure out why the wrong answer you liked is wrong. So my goal here is to think, right, what are our characteristics of right and wrong answers? So I want everyone to pick one of the wrong answers and describe why it's wrong. Try to go beyond like, because it's off topic. Be very specific, give very specific language, what makes the wrong answers wrong. Okay, so 1 minute, type it into the chat, just hit enter whenever you're ready. If you're done, like think about another one, right? Okay, so think about why the wrong answers are wrong here and try to articulate it to everybody. Great. So I've put some of you guys' great comments here, right? So A, the passage isn't arguing, it's not proposing what the public should do. It's not giving a new suggestion. B, again, it's not saying what college students should do or should not do. D, right? This was a tempting wrong answer because, hey, we had this stuff about high and low value businesses, but environmental conditions are off topic. Also, I'd say like the author isn't necessarily evaluating the viability. The author is presenting us with like, hey, some of these might be less, high profit, but the author isn't specifically evaluating like on his or her own. E, this analogy isn't given and it's too specific. It's too specific. So let's generalize from here. So this is a great example. C is right, but what qualities of wrong answers does this illuminate? So main point questions overall, this is what I want you guys to be thinking about every time you see a main point question, especially if you're like, oh, wasn't quite sure about this passage. We're going to recognize them because language in the question stem itself will say things like main point or primary purpose. What does a right answer look like? Our right answer is going to cover a lot of real estate. A couple of you guys use this language of summary around C, around choice C for the last one. And that's exactly right. So we want it to cover nice broad real estate, give a summary, and that means it often is vague in tone, right? So our right answer here, present a nuanced view of a contemporary economic issue. It doesn't even tell us what the issue is. It gives us like a nice umbrella category here. So it's vague. That helps it be a summary. It's vague. So it covers a lot of real estate and it's vague, and its tone is often academic and measured. It's not prescribing what we should do. It's not making a really extreme argument. Instead, we might see verbs like describe or discuss. This one said present. So pretty nuanced view. Wrong answer flags to look out for are wrong real estate in both directions. So too specific. We saw this here where we're talking about like career decisions, real estate decisions. Okay, maybe that was mentioned, but it's too specific. It's not the main point. And also too vague. So that's a little bit going again. I know I said vague is good, but if our passage, our answer choice just said something like describes a current state of affairs, that would be a little too broad, right? Or like describe something to do with money. That would be too broad. That's a little more rare than too specific, but it's something to look out for as well. So we want that sort of Goldilocks right amount of real estate coverage, that it summarizes what's in the passage, but not in too nitty-gritty of language. We also want to be wary of extreme language and very strong opinions where it's like telling college students what they should do, and things that are out of scope, like environmental decisions or conditions, things that weren't even mentioned in the passage. Okay, Garrett is asking, doesn't primary purpose mean it's the first purpose and not necessarily the main one? No, let me clear that up for you, Garrett. Primary purpose means the main purpose. It is not the first thing the author says. It is the primary as in the main thing the author says. So what I want to do now is think about this idea of hunting for answers. And what we're going to do is a little exercise where I'm going to show you a main point question without the passage. And I want you to think about these patterns of right and wrong answers, and I'll have them on the slide as well, to identify what answers do you want to red flag and why. So what answers to red flag and why, right? Sometimes our red flag answers are correct. It's not foolproof, but we want to think what feels like I want to be a little bit skeptical of this, and what answers do we want to green flag and why? What answers give us language that we're like, ooh, that looks like a right answer vibe for a GRE main point question. So what answers to green flag and why? Okay, so I'll give you guys a minute and 30 seconds for this. I want you to type up at least one for each, something to red flag and something to green flag, and I'll tell you when to hit enter. So here it is. I've got the question and I've got at the bottom our right answer and wrong answer flags to look for. A minute and 30 seconds to think about this. All right, go ahead and hit enter or take another 30 seconds to type up your thoughts. We want to, right? And our goal isn't to be like, and then I figured out exactly the right answer, but to begin to develop a sense of what I want a green flag and red flag here. Okay, so I'm seeing and I'm scrolling here and scroll through each other's and read because there's lots of really great great points here. Okay, so I'm seeing a couple people corroborating or agreeing that corroborate feels maybe like a red flag word. A couple people are typing that of like confirming, like these passages are much more likely to suggest than fully corroborate. Megan also noting, hey, maybe A, so I'll note, okay, so D might be a little bit too extreme. We might red flag that. A noting the history of supernovae, we might red flag that a little bit too specific, perhaps. C, I'm seeing some mixed results on. So some folks are saying like, hey, let's green flag C for juxtapose. And maybe red flagging for opposing. I'm going to suggest actually that we green flag potentially C. Like we might, let's green flag juxtapose, but we'll be a little bit, we want to make sure we confirm it in the text itself. But I think juxtapose could be like a good verb here. So there's some sort of mixed reviews on E. And I'm also C, excuse me. I'm also seeing green flags on B, like describing. That's subtle and not too opinionated. I think describing and juxtaposing are great things to green flag here. E, I'm seeing also some mixed results, but mostly folks are saying maybe that's a little too vague, perhaps. So perhaps a little too vague, like how science and philosophy interrelate is pretty broad. Okay, great work, guys. So again, we're thinking we want to red flag things that feel very strong, like corroborate. Red flag things that feel very specific, like the history of supernovae. We want to green flag things that seem subtle and vague, like describing or juxtaposing, but maybe not so broad as to be like how all of science and philosophy interrelate. And I'll let you guys know that the right answer to this one was B. The goal of this exercise is not to have spotted exactly the right answer, but to start to get that sense of like what right and wrong might look like. Let's try this on another question. So again, a question without the passage and thinking, what am I going to red flag and what am I going to green flag? So I'll give you guys a full 2 minutes here on this one and think, what would you want to eliminate or be skeptical of and what might you want to hold on to? So 2 minutes for this and I'll tell you to hit enter at the end. Yeah, and as you guys send in your notes, add a little bit more detail. So I'm seeing like red flag B, but why? Okay, great comments coming in, guys. And I put a couple up on the slide, and if I missed your, like, there's a lot I missed. There's a lot of great comments in there. Jenny, I wanted to highlight this comment here because this is great, like, weighing of different words. So on the one hand, we have our nice word discuss, but then we get this idea of the two best painters. Sounds a little extreme. So great work continuing to read on past our like green flag word of discuss. I think anytime we see the word best, we want to be a little bit skeptical of that. Megan made a great general point, right? So if I see words like more, better, or worse, we're making a comparison here. Let's make sure it's warranted. Let's red flag that. So D, more sophisticated. Elizabeth had also noted like that seemed a little bit specific. Lexi noted like, you know, more sophisticated is a red flag because it's more of an opinion. So a lot of folks are noting, right? Like, that seems a little bit strong of an opinion. Excellent. Okay, so let me see it. Let me scroll back up and see what kinds of green flags you guys noted. Great. Okay, so we're seeing some good green flag, potentially E, like illustrate, right? Maybe Picasso taught Matisse. C, possible and but very short, says Amira. Ali says C, green flag seems vague but academic. Excellent. Okay, so I think both C and E are great answers to green flag. Compare selected works to illustrate something. Both of these are pretty open. It totally could be true that that like a passage could be about these things, right? We could be illustrating a teaching. We could be comparing to selected works. In this case, C ends up being the right answer, but these are both great answer choices to green flag. I'd say B, you know, B is, it doesn't pop out in the same way that like more sophisticated pops out to me for red flag, but ultimately saying like, and then we're endorsing a revision, that kind of level of definitiveness, I might red flag a little bit. Okay, great work, everybody. So looking out for these passages. And I love this summary that Megan gave of like more, better, or worse. Let's automatically red flag as well. Right, loving wishy-washy or short verbiage. It goes against maybe what we expect a little bit. So let's try another kind of question, then we'll come circle back and see another main point question. So I'm going to now show you an inference question. And again, like sigh of relief, I'll show it to you with the passage. And this will be to illustrate, like this time, really do it, like read the passage, do the question, and then we'll think, okay, what does this illustrate about right and wrong answers for these questions? So here is an inference question. I want you guys to actually read the passage, do the question. I'll give you 2 minutes for that. And then we'll think about what makes the right answer right and the wrong answer is wrong. To begin, just send to me, send just to Rina /panelists, whatever is in your chat. What answer do you choose? Okay, go for it, 2 minutes. I'm seeing a couple, we have 30 more seconds. I'm seeing a couple folks, a sizable chunk of folks telling me that their answer is A, and I'm gonna let you guys know that A isn't right. So if you selected A, I want you to think about why A might be wrong and see if you want to revise your answer with that information in mind. Nikita, I like your thinking there that you sent me. All right, so I'm going to tell you guys what the right answer is. The right answer here is C. Okay, and lots of folks sent, whoops, sorry about that. Let me go back. Beep, beep, sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay, C is our right answer. Let me show you where our line support is for C. If we look back at the passage, we see that some of these women participated as nurses or providers of supplies, and such women sometimes died. So we're putting together these two lines, and this is classic in an inference question where we have line support, but we're putting together a couple of things. We have line support that they participated in these roles and that they sometimes died. So C is our right answer. I like that folks are noting, right, it covers some real estate. Yeah, it doesn't literally, so Garrett is saying, but it does not literally state that they died, right? So sometimes we do have to take one extra step here. So when they say, if such women died, we're making the inference that they weren't talking about a scenario that never happened, like they're describing something that did happen. So we do need to put that information together, right? Like we don't literally have them say, and they did die. But it isn't such a huge leap to make. So we're, again, it's sort of this Goldilocks level of leap where we're putting together stuff that's in the passage and making some maybe like a little bit of a common sense leap that if they say, if such women died, that implies to us that it happens sometimes. Megan is asking, isn't the point of inferences that it won't necessarily be in the passage directly? Great question, Megan. So as much as possible, you do want to find line support for your right answer. So I'm going to note this up here. Our right answer, we're looking to be able to point to the proof. In other words, find line support. But what we can expect is that the answer will rephrase what's in the passage. They're not going to use the same words. They're going to use different words. They will rephrase and maybe link different sentences. So they might do some linking and they might use different words that you're a little bit like, wait, that new way of phrasing it, is that right? So we're going to look out for rephrasing. And in fact, wrong answers sometimes use like matchy words, but in the wrong way. Like our right answer will in fact give us like a slightly different view of something that's in the passage. So I would like folks again to take a minute and pick one wrong answer and type into the chat, why is it wrong? And extra credit, pick one that you found tempting, maybe even one that you chose. What makes it wrong? So pick a wrong answer and describe what makes it wrong and enter into the chat. And if you already sent me one, maybe pick one more. Good. Great. E was tempting for a couple folks, but that's a sort of real life leap that we can't take. There's nothing about men in this passage that's out of scope. Like real life, we're like, oh, men also exist, but not in the passage. So men, I'm going to summarize that out. OOS stands for out of scope. Okay, very, very good. Okay, we're noting A has that word more in it that we're skeptical of. So this is an unwarranted comparison. So we have, hey, they're died as individuals and not as potential source of life. We have this kind of like way in which older women or younger women might have been looked at differently, but whether they were lamented more or less is maybe tempting, but too big of a jump. Same with D, right? Like special status, hey, we're seeing how like maybe the ways in which they were thought about is different, but more special, more lamented, not supported. More courageous, again, this idea of an unwarranted comparison. Okay, excellent work. So To summarize for these inference questions, we're going to recognize them. And this is specifically, so I want to emphasize, this is specifically for our content passages that are more academic ones. We'll see an example of a logic passage in a moment, and that's like a real world scenario about, you know, like buying lottery tickets or something. It's more real world and less like something you would read in a academic book, right? So these are the more academic ones. We're recognizing them because they're on academic passages. Language like infer, the passage supports which of the following, the author would agree. And we're green flagging for right answers. Of course, things that are provable with line support if we have the passage in front of us. But if we're stumped by that, we're looking for neutralish tone. That's easier to prove. Something that is wishy-washy and vague is easier to prove than something that's very specific. And soft language like some or can, again, easier to prove. Wrong answer flags are extreme things that are hard to approve. So things like extreme language, very strong opinions, or big sweeping statements of like, this is always better than that. Ice cream is always better than chocolate cake. Like, that's a pretty sweeping statement. Unwarranted comparison. So getting to this idea of more or better, I want to make sure that's supported in the passage. Matchy jargon, when there are like tough words in the passage and then they just like sprinkle that word in an answer choice, that's like often a tricky trap that you're like, oh, I recognize that word, but maybe they're saying it in the wrong way. And out of scope, like in that last one we saw where they brought up men, that's maybe a real life leap we would make, but it's not actually in the passage. So again, I'm going to show you a sample question without the passage. I'll give you guys 2 minutes and send to everyone, what are you going to red flag and what are you going to green flag here? 2 minutes, go for it. Okay, awesome. So a couple of you are noting A, to red flag more, so unwarranted comparison. And also that it's just overall very specific, getting into this thing about like Olympic competition. So it's super specific. A couple people also like immediately noted C, like must be good conversationalists. We have strong language. We have an extreme opinion. Janine, I like how you're noting about D, what you said about D as a green flag. D green flag because it states can and has no extreme opinion or comparison. So can, you know, and not too extreme. So nothing too extreme here. I can't remember who, sorry that I'm missing your name here, but someone noted that E was vague of generally. So generally nice and vague here. B, folks were also red flagging because it's the idea of what is best demonstrated, this language of what is best. Okay, great work. And in this case, I'll tell you guys that D is the right answer. So can actually be reciprocally nourishing. It's nice and vague. E, I think, is a good one to green flag as well. It's a little bit sweeping, but it's not one I might red flag without reading the passage itself. Anika's noting, like, I didn't like actually in D, seems too informal. Well, I guess one thing to note is these are written by Manhattan Prep and these aren't ETS questions. So maybe their questions might be slightly more formal, just to take a slight grain of salt with like all of like the tiny tonality. But I would actually err on the side of like simpler answers are more often right. Like simpler can often be better. If it's like, you're like, it seems too easy, right? Like sometimes that's like the right answer, but you might be right that the ETS would might phrase it slightly differently. So good point there, Anika. Okay, let me pause here. And I have another question for you. I also want to look at logic-based questions, but any questions that you guys have or thoughts, just like enter them into the chat. I saw earlier that Megan had noted that there's another reading comprehension like YouTube video up there on Think Like a Lawyer as a good one to attend. So just to call that out as like a great one to watch as well. But other questions at this point before we keep going, or like sort of like macro level comments? How do you know if something is vague? I think about, so vague, and if other people have thoughts about this, that's such a great question. So vague, I want to think of that as, it's like, it is an umbrella. It gives an umbrella answer that many specific instances could fit into. And it doesn't, so I'm defining it positively and negatively. So I'd say like on the positive side, it's an umbrella answer that many things could fit into. And it doesn't make concrete claims about numbers. So I want to like be wary of things like most or all or never. So it might say words like some, can, right? Like it rains sometimes, that could be one day or every day, right? So it doesn't make concrete claims about numbers or about comparisons. So our vague answer, and this, so something that is like nice and vague is an umbrella category. It doesn't say one thing is better than the other, and it doesn't give us something about like majority or most or never of very, very specific numbers. Great, right? So Megan is pointing out, right? So we can have one rotten spot in an answer that like twists it all up. So sometimes everything will feel right, but you know that phrase of like one rotten apple spoils the bunch. So one rotten apple in that answer choice, like one little missed detail, like one point where they say, and this makes it even better or something like that, right? Like one little detail can make it wrong. So we want every single answer choice to be able to be provable in the text itself. I want to make sure we have time to see a logic-based one, and I'll show this one to you guys with the passage in it. So then we can see like how do we apply what we can infer or not to back to the passage. So here is the example. Again, we're thinking our right answer is in the text, but it might rephrase, it might put pieces of information together, and our wrong answers maybe take one leap too much. Maybe they have one unwarranted comparison or one thing that's a little too extreme. So 2 minutes for this one. Think about this logic-based inference question. Okay, awesome work, guys. So these logic-based questions, more real-world scenarios, right? So this isn't an academic passage telling me about the history of octopuses or the the railroad development in the United States. It's more of a real-world scenario about like what's happening with governments. Our right answer here is A. Now, one thing I want to say about these logic-based passages is that main point questions, we were wary of very specific answers because they were asking for the main point. For these inference questions, specific might be okay. Our answer might be something very, very specific. That is fine as long as it is a fact and as long as it's a fact that's inferable. Our wrong answers are not facts. They're opinions, they're future predictions, they're unwarranted comparisons, they're things that are very extreme and just can't be proven. So we're looking for something that feels like facty. A bunch of people noted when you were messaging me your answers that this A has this great language of at least some. That quantifier of some is so provable. My example earlier, if it rains sometimes, so provable. All we need is one day of rain to prove at least sometimes it rains. We need to prove at least some foreign companies. All we need to know is that there's at least one of them. Now, in our passage, right, they don't straight up say this in this exact words. We're putting together some pieces of information, but we have that, okay, we have government restrictions that have severely limited, and that because these are in the United States, and that because of these restrictions, these scientists have gone to work for foreign companies. So we have severe government restrictions in the US. Because of these restrictions, US scientists are going elsewhere. So it's another good example of we're putting together the information. We are taking like one step by putting together those pieces of information, but we do have line support, and we're smiling upon this qualifier of like at least some, work under fewer. It's not saying how many fewer. So our numbers here are very vague. They're not giving us very concrete numbers like most or all or majority, things that we'd have to like see the whole picture for. We need just at least some or fewer. So let's look at our wrong answers here. We have great examples of something we want to be very skeptical of, which is future predictions. You cannot predict the future. So that will never be provable. Like that is impossible to prove. So there will be a significant influx. Oops, I meant to do that in red. Will be, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. In the near future, US companies will no longer, if these restrictions are lifted, these scientists will break their contracts. Anytime I see a future prediction like that, we cannot predict the future. We could say maybe this will happen, right? But on an inference logic question, I want to be able to pull a fact that must be true. See, I'm being skeptical of this language of in all parts of the world, right? So I like words like some. It rains sometimes, easy to prove. It rains all the time. I would need to be alive for all of eternity to prove that it rains all of the time. So let me summarize here. For our logic-based questions, we're going to recognize them because it's these logic real-world passages. They'll have language like infer, which one of the following conclusions can be properly drawn, follows logically. And our right answer is provable with line support. And specifically, we're looking for a fact. So something that's a little more detailed might be okay here. It doesn't need to summarize everything, but we want it to have that fact-like quality, something that could be proven. And we're going to flag things like opinions, future predictions, what one should do, or extreme language, all of which are very hard to prove. It's hard to prove what someone should do, what will happen, or very extremes. Elise asks, what if the passage is making a claim about something in the future, right? Okay, so right, all of these patterns that I'm sharing with you, you want to take with a grain of salt. We can find some example of where it wasn't 100% true. Like there are main point questions out there where a strong opinion is the right answer, right? But that's because in the passage there was a strong opinion. So these are patterns that we're looking for to have us that instinct of, I'm red flagging it. I'm not eliminating it, but I'm red flagging it. And the parts that I'm going to red flag, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check them against the passage and see if there's line support. So if I see an opinion, I I'm not saying like 100% of the time that's wrong. I'm definitely not saying that, but I'm saying when we see that opinion, I want to make sure I'm like, ooh, let me double check that that opinion is in the passage. If I see a future prediction, I'm like, oh, I'm really, really skeptical of this. At least to be honest, I've never seen an example of that being the right answer, but I don't want to say never because you can't prove that. But I want to say like, let me see if that's in the passage. If I see extreme language, sometimes extreme language is right, but I want to make sure it is supported in the text. I want to make sure it matches the tone. So these are things that tend to be wrong. These tend to be ways that the GRE spoils the bunch of apples, right? With these extreme words, these opinion words, these unwarranted comparisons. But I'm not 100% of the time eliminating them. Instead, I'm flagging them for review. I'm flagging them to match up back against the passage. Awesome. Okay, so let me just show you guys, and then I'll pause and ask for questions. But I just want to show you the summary again. So this is our logic-based question, how we're recognizing them. Our right answers are facts, things that are possible to infer. Our wrong answer choices are all these forms of not facts, opinions, future predictions, should, like prescriptive language, and things that are extreme. Main point questions. It's a different flavor of question. We're looking for something that covers a lot of real estate, that's vague, that's a nice umbrella category, and it has a measured tone. Language like describe or discuss is language we want a green flag. Things that we want to flag for review are things that are very, very specific, or maybe like so vague as to say nothing. Things that are extreme language or very strong opinions, and things that just mention things that weren't in the passage at all. And content inference passages, similar to the logic ones, but noting here we do want something that is like a little bit more soft and neutral, like it's less about facts and more about something that I can pull from this academic passage. Soft language like some or can is language I want a green flag. And again, we are red flagging hard to prove things like very strong opinions, sweeping statements, unwarranted comparison. Anytime we see those words like more or better, we're also going to be skeptical of matchy jargon where they use like the same tricky vocab word in the answer as in the passage. All right, so those are the main points I wanted to make. Let me say one last thing, which is we do these once or twice a month, so you can keep signing up for these free prep hours. Also, recordings of all the ones in the past are up on our YouTube page. If you want to take a full class, this is the link to check out what our full class schedule is coming up. And you can try any of our full classes in person. Well, we're not doing in person right now. Online for free, you can try session 1. All of them follow the same curriculum, so the session 1 is always very similar, so you won't like get a full course by sitting in on 1,000 session 1s, but you can sort of test drive and see which feels like the right match for you. I'm going to stop sharing, and if you are like set to go, thank you guys so much for coming, and great to meet you all. But if you have any other questions, I will stay on for another couple minutes to answer any last questions. Thank you guys. Elizabeth, do I teach GRE prep courses? Yes, I do. I don't think I have any coming up immediately on the schedule. I'm in the middle of one right now, but I do generally. Okay, Ali asks, what's the difference between inference content versus inference logic? So Ali, it's about the kind of passage, but how it, right? So content is an academic passage, logic is the real life passage. How it shows up, those logic ones, we want an answer that looks like a fact. The content ones, it's less about like a real life looking fact and more about, I need to find line support in the passage itself. So logic is like, logic we can get more specific, nitty gritty. It's something that like I could see in a textbook almost, this mountain is 1,000 feet tall. That's a fact, right? So that could be a right answer. The logic, so that's our logic ones is like, I want it to look like a fact, like a hard and fast fact, right? The content ones might not be quite as concrete, but they'll be like, yes, sometimes these women died in battle. That's the kind of inference we're making. Good luck, Megan, taking it for multiple times. Great luck. There aren't free one-on-one tutors. Our tutoring is a paid service. Sorry, Sarah. Yes, Nikita, that's right. To summarize, there are two types of passage, logic and academic. Yes, good luck to all. Yes, Megan, we generally like alternate quant and verbal, so I can't totally prove that. Like, well, you know, it's not posted in advance. I'm not sure who, what the person who's doing the one later this month is planning, but we generally try to alternate. Good luck, Daniela. Sarah, best way to get a higher score. I'd say like read a bunch of passages and do questions, just like can't be beat to do a bunch of practice. And what we did today of really analyzing why the right answers are right and why the wrong answers are wrong is a really, really good way to improve, because they do follow these patterns that you just start to get more familiar with, of like just kind of having a sense of what right and wrong looks like, Sarah. So do a bunch of passages, but also do a detailed analysis of why the right answers are right and wrong answers are wrong. So when you get something wrong, don't just move on and be like, oh, well, I guess C was right. Be like, let me examine this, and maybe like make someone who you live with or a friend of yours like talk through it, because putting it into words is actually a really, really good way to improve. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm so glad it was helpful. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. Janine, we cover the essay section in the course a little bit, but to be frank, not a ton. So if you are working mostly on the writing, I would suggest check out our Interact videos. There's some YouTube videos up there, or working on with a tutor one-on-one. Our primary focus for a lot of this stuff is the quant and verbal sections. Nikita, the ETS has some free practice tests online. So ETS are the makers of the GRE. So I would check that out. And Manhattan Prep also has a free practice test online. So those are great places to start for practice test answers. All right, guys, I'm not seeing other questions coming in, and it's top of the hour. So thank you all so much for coming, and good luck with your studies. And when you take the test for the first, second, or next time, best of luck with it. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.